Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. As always, I'm your host, the Game Master, and today's video deals with the Hellfire Club, McCarthyism, and some adult themes. So, viewer discretion is advised. But before we get into the game itself, be sure to smash that like button. Check to see if you're still subscribed because we did lose some subscribers recently. YouTube loves to unsubscribe you without you knowing it. Ring the bell so you know when we upload more content. And as always, be sure to leave us a comment because that really helps us out on our end with the YouTube algorithm. We've got a fantastic community here, and it is all thanks to you guys. Thank you so much for being here. With all that said, let's dive in. Prologue to this one takes place in February of 1950, when Senator Joseph McCarthy suddenly rose to national fame when he asserted in a speech that he had a list of members of the Communist Party and members of a spy ring who were employed in the State Department. After his speech, McCarthy made additional accusations of communist infiltration into the State Department, the administration of President Harry S. Truman, the United States Army, and the superhero community. He used various charges of communism, communist sympathy, disloyalty, or sex crimes to attack a number of individuals inside and outside of the government. This led to the so-called Lavender Scare against suspected homosexuals, as homosexuality in 1950 was prohibited by law. Which brings us to the main plot of today's game, when Superman Red receives a subpoena to appear before the House Un-American Activities Committee, also known as HUAC. This time around, they are investigating him for allegations of sex crimes. And in specific, they ask him if he is a quote unquote sodomite. Superman Red says he doesn't sleep with men, if that's what they mean, but they say that wasn't the question. Superman Red is annoyed, to say the least. They push him to answer the question, and Red is tempted to throw this whole building into the sun. He doesn't, but he wants to. Their interrogation is unpleasant, and Red says he isn't one to kiss and tell. They keep pushing his buttons, and he says living on this planet is getting less and less worth it. He tells the HUAC members that the people in the superhero community who have the ability to travel through space most assuredly will if this keeps up. McCarthy says that would be just fine. Red scoffs and says, let's see how much you like it next time there's an alien invasion and we just leave instead of saving you guys. McCarthy says, was that a threat? Are you threatening us right now? But Superman Red just leaves. As he goes outside, grinding his teeth and loosening his tie and dress shirt, he runs into the Black Queen, aka Celine Gallio, and she came here just to see him. Her political contacts in the Hellfire Club informed her of his subpoena. Celine says, hello, lover, in a sultry tone of voice. Red is surprised and says the last time he saw her, she was helping England during the Revolutionary War. Celine replies and says, and you were loyal to the American government. How's that working out for you these days? She smirks. Red is aggravated. Celine sees this and shifts her weight to the other leg, as if to punctuate that they've gotten off on the wrong foot. She says that in 1776, she told him that the Hellfire Club were into the same things that he was into and found themselves surrounded by Puritans. And here we are again, she says. Red takes a breath and says, "Look, I appreciate what you're saying, but the Black Queen sees that he's hesitant to give in to temptation. So she gestures to a young woman named Emma Frost to join them. Emma walks over wearing a white dress. Red takes notice of her staggeringly good looks, as well as the fact that Celine is still smiling when Emma starts to paw at him. Red can tell Celine is willing to share him, which is a stark contrast to the conversation that he just had with Huak. And on Emma's end, it's love at first sight. So Emma reads Red's mind, gets his address, and all sorts of other useful information, and telepathically shares it with Celine. Emma and Celine are in constant telepathic contact, and now they know everything about Red, including how he just fantasized about throwing those bureaucrats into the sun. Because of this, they say all the right things. For instance, since they know where Red is staying while he's in Washington, D.C., Celine says that that's the hotel where she's staying at, too. She asks Red if it would be out of the way for him to give them a ride. Red tries to be a gentleman, so he says he's staying there too, and he's happy to take them, that it's not out of the way at all. On the way there, he tries to make small talk with Emma by asking her what her favorite movie is. So she tells him the name of his favorite movie, then his favorite song, etc. So Red is starting to wonder if Emma Frost could actually be his soulmate. He has no idea she's psychic. When they get to the hotel, Celine calls room service and asks for a bottle of wine to be sent up. At this point, I should probably explain that Emma's not trying to do anything evil at this point. Thanks to the Valentino effect, for her, it really is love at first sight when it comes to Red. So much so, in fact, she would do anything to have him, to the point that she would actually change her favorite song if it meant being with him. The degree to which she feels that way is her justification for everything she's doing right now. Likewise, it's worth mentioning that in his days as Dagda, Red was the lover of the Morrigan, and every year on May 1st, the Morrigan would try to destroy the world. And every year he would satisfy her to such a cosmic extent that she would spare humanity for another year. So now apply that to Celine. Is she secretly a villain? Yes. But so is the Morrigan. And just like the Morrigan, when she was with Dagda in 1776, it was the best night of her life. So from her point of view, he's kind of like a drug, and she'd do anything for more. So he is actually having an effect on them. But they, of course, are all about tempting him and trying to get him to do some of the stuff that they're into. So it's going both ways. Both sides of this are affecting the other. So what happens with the Hellfire Club in the future in the comic books is not necessarily where we're going with this in the game. At any rate, so I don't want to be crass. Let's just say that everybody has fun that night. And the next morning, when they wake up in a pile of wine bottles, Red is happy because last night was nice. But the morning sort of stings because he feels like this is fleeting and the good time will just come to an end again. And honestly, if you've been following the channel, Red's life has been pretty painful for the past few years. And a big part of why that is would be the prevailing philosophies of the 20th century versus Red's rather medieval way of thinking. As the girls wake up and nestle into him, Emma begins to read his mind again, and both she and Celine become aware of his thoughts and his feelings and that sting, the growing sadness within him. Celine is being genuinely loving right now when she asks if he's had very many girlfriends since they were last together in 1776. None that felt like sticking around, he says, with a facial expression that says he's trying to joke, but that he's not thrilled with that situation. Celine says she understands because she and Red are both immortal. She was actually born about 17,000 years ago in the age of Conan. And like him, she lived as a barbarian for a while. So she soothes him with her honey like words, saying how unnatural modern society is when such puny men as the ones who questioned him yesterday hide like cowards behind bureaucracy and rules. Emma says that men like that are running this world right into the ground and that the system is broken. And Red agrees. Celine mentions the Hellfire Club and how it was a gag reflex to the British royal family, who were similarly bureaucratic, stuffy, and bad at just about everything. Red asks if this is another sales pitch. Again, feigning humor, but his body language and tone of voice conveys that he doesn't really like talking about this right now. Celine sees this and tells him she loves him and that she never got over him and that she's been looking for him and only him for the last 174 years. Red asks himself why they didn't stay together, and then he remembers why. He reminds her that she was working against America and sided with the Redcoats. Celine says, "We don't always get it right. We make mistakes. That was a mistake, but it was also nearly 2 centuries ago, and I've changed a lot over the last 2 centuries." She says that she doesn't want to lose him again, and Emma says she doesn't want to lose him either. And for the first time in a long time, his heart doesn't ache. So Red is tempted into joining the Hellfire Club. That following evening, Superman Red walks into the Hellfire Club building, located at 840 Fifth Avenue between 66th and 67th Street on Manhattan's Upper East Side in the Lenox Hill neighborhood of New York City. On one arm, he has the Black Queen. On the other arm, he has Emma Frost, who, by the way, has yet to ascend to the rank of White Queen. As they enter the building, Red notices the furnishings are all from around the time of the Revolutionary War. As he takes all of this in, a man walks towards him. It's Sebastian Shaw, who's dressed in black Revolutionary War era formal wear. Shaw offers to shake Red's hand and asks Celine who her guest is. Celine smiles and introduces Red as, quote unquote, a god named Dagda. Red is taken aback by such an introduction. He tries to back down from that, bringing his hands up in a gesture that clearly says he's not very fond of that title. Sebastian Shaw arcs an eyebrow and seems skeptical, partially because in the past, Celine has claimed to be the goddess of the moon, and Shaw is very desensitized to her shenanigans. Celine says the Germans called him Beowulf. In the days of Shakespeare, he was King Oberon, and to the people of Camelot, he was their beloved King Arthur. But Shaw's not buying it. So he says, "And I suppose you have Excalibur to prove it." Just then, a voice from behind King Arthur says, "He sure does." Red turns around and sees a familiar face. "Because I'm the guy that got it back for him," Howard Stark proclaims with a grin. "Howard, how are you?" Superman Red says with a big grin and a friendly slap to Howard's arm that rattles his mortal bones. The arrogance drains from Shaw's face, and he begins to suspect that not only is this man exactly who Celine and Stark claim he is, but that this is a power play by Celine. So Shaw speaks up. King Dagda, King Beowulf, King Arthur, King Oberon. I think I'm beginning to sense a pattern, Shaw says with disdain in his voice. Another man enters, this time huge, like a sumo wrestler, wearing an all-white suit. He is the White King, also known as Wilson Fisk. I'm with Shaw on this one. We already have a Black King, and I have no intentions of retiring anytime soon. Superman Red, again, brings up his hands in a kind of a defensive gesture. Look, I'm not really sure what exactly it is we're talking about here. I was under the impression Emma and Celine were bringing me to some sort of a speakeasy or something. Harry Leland is leaning in a doorway and says that's not a bad way of looking at it. Shaw gives Leland an annoyed glance, and Leland says, look at the man. He's got a pretty girl on each arm. I think his reasons for being here are quite clear, Leland says. Things are almost settling down. So Celine decides to heat things back up again by saying, actually, I was thinking my beloved here would be an ideal Red King. Red King, Fisk says. Absolutely not, says Shaw, whose face flashes red with anger. Shaw, at this point, has had enough. So he gets physical with Superman Red, which is a bit of a trick on Shaw's part because Sebastian Shaw has energy absorption that can raise his strength to 12 APs. But anything over that actually does damage him. Superman Red has a strength of 50 APs, which is just way more than what Shaw has encountered thus far in 1950. So after Shaw's energy absorption is done raising his strength to 12, that's still the 38 AP effect value left for him to contend with versus his body, which is only in the 11 to 12 AP range. So when Superman Red has finally had enough and punches Shaw, again, Red's been having people pushing him around for days now, right? So Red does 27 points of damage, and that's without any column shifts. So Sebastian Shaw is knocked out in one punch. Celine and Emma are very excited about this. They've backed a winner, right? But everyone else is shocked, including Shinobi Shaw, who is a half Japanese 5-year-old boy who runs over to where his father is laying. Superman Red feels bad and tries to explain himself to the boy, who just cries and yells at him to leave his daddy alone. Red says, I didn't know there would be kids here. Howard Stark says sometimes he brings his son Tony here, and Warren Worthington II sometimes brings his kid too. According to Howard, the club has a sort of an inner circle. As he explains it, he gestures to the bullseye on a nearby dartboard. According to Howard, that's for grown-ups. Then he says there's a ring around that is also adult, but less involved. And he says right now, we're in the lobby. And he points to the outermost ring of the dartboard. That's where visitors and, children of members, stuff like that are allowed to be. Superman Red sees Shinobi Shaw cry, and he feels like garbage. So Howard Stark says, "Oh, come on. Sebastian can be a real jerk sometimes. He ran his mouth, and you shut it for him. He had it coming." Shinobi looks at Howard Stark with tears in his eyes. Howard says, "Your old man will be all right, kiddo. He just got some sense knocked into him, that's all." And with that, Howard slaps Superman Red on the back and says, "Come on, let's get you a drink." As they walk into the next room, Superman Red asks Howard if this is really a good place to bring kids, what with all the girls and drinking and such. Howard says, Tony practically grew up here, and it didn't seem to hurt him any. Which brings us to the epilogue. Joe McCarthy and the House Un-American Activities Committee blacklist Superman Red. People who are blacklisted are attacked. They are turned down by employers. Basically, they're shunned by society. So the man formerly known as Dagda becomes known as the Red King behind the scenes throughout the 1950s. And his secret life as a member of the Hellfire Club is why he was so heavily involved in the Golden Age stories, but wasn't seen as much in the Silver Age. As the Red King, he buys a vast spread of land in Albion, Montana, just northwest of the geographic center of the United States. Albion, by the way, is an old name for England, so that's a bit of a joke coming from the man once known as King Arthur. It is in Albion that he builds a new Camelot of sorts, one with his own private underground subway system and a private airfield. Aside from that, there are no roads to or from his massive mansion. He doesn't need them since he can fly. The Red King spends most of the 1950s here, and as far as Celine and Emma go, they really do love the Red King. And unlike certain other characters that came and went over the years, they are staying by his side. And while he does make them into better people, they do have an effect on him as well. And as much as they do love him, they still manage to turn him into a weapon against other members of the Hellfire Club who stand in their way. The White King, aka Wilson Fisk, leaves the Hellfire Club and develops a deep hatred for the Red King. Fisk becomes known as the Kingpin, and by the 1960s, he runs all the crime in New York City. But that's a story for another day. We had fun playing this one. We hope that you enjoyed hearing about it. If so, smash that like button. Make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell for notifications, and as always, be sure to leave us a comment as that really helps out with the YouTube algorithm. From all of us here at the longest running superhero role-playing game on Earth, we hope that you guys have a good one, and we'll see you in the next adventure.